You've probably never once looked at a spider and felt your heart melt. But show that same person a baby otter, and something involuntary happens in their chest. Nobody teaches you to react that way. It just happens. So what's actually going on? Why does one animal on this planet make you want to protect it, and another makes you want to get as far away as possible? Here's the part most people never stop to question. It's not really about the animal at all. It's about geometry. In the 1940s, a researcher named Konrad Lorenz noticed something strange while studying animal behavior. Certain physical features, a big rounded head, large eyes relative to the body, a short stubby nose, chubby limbs, triggered an automatic caretaking response in humans. He called it Kinchin schema, the baby schema. It wasn't just a description, it was a trigger. A pattern your brain was built to detect and respond to, whether or not you wanted it to. That pattern is exactly why a human infant's face is built the way it is. Big eyes relative to the skull, a flat little nose, a high rounded forehead. Evolution needed helpless infants to trigger instant devotion in adults who otherwise had every reason to prioritize their own survival first. A baby that looked cute got fed, protected, carried. A baby that didn't risk being ignored. Over hundreds of thousands of years, the faces that survived were the ones built to hijack an adult's attention. And here's where it gets strange. That trigger doesn't check what species is standing in front of it. A baby panda has the same basic proportions as a human infant. Round head, big eyes, stubby limbs. So does a puppy, so does a kitten, so does a baby seal. Your brain isn't responding to "this is a panda." It's pattern matching against a much older, much simpler shape, and the panda happens to fit it almost perfectly. This is why an owl, despite technically being a bird of prey with talons built for killing, still reads as cute to most people. Forward-facing eyes, a flat round face, a compact body. Structurally, it's tripping the exact same wiring a human baby trips. Meanwhile, a hawk with eyes on the sides of his head and a sharper, elongated face rarely gets called cute, even though it's arguably just as impressive a predator, sometimes a far more effective one in the air. Primates make this even clearer because you can watch the effect fade in real time as a single species grows up. A baby chimpanzee has a flattened face, big eyes, and a rounded skull, and people consistently describe it as adorable. An adult chimpanzee with a longer jaw, smaller eyes relative to its head, and a more muscular frame gets described very differently. Nothing about the animal's danger level changed overnight. The geometry did, and the human reaction changed right along with it, almost automatically. Now flip it entirely. A spider has none of the baby schema features. No big eyes in proportion to its body. No soft rounded head. Instead, multiple small eyes, angular jointed legs, and a body plan that shares almost nothing in common with a human infant. There's no ambiguity for your brain to resolve. It simply never fires the caretaking response in the first place, and it doesn't stop there. It fires the opposite response instead. Disgust and fear aren't just the absence of cute. They're often their own separate reaction entirely, and this one has a name too. Contamination sensitivity. Animals with too many legs, too many eyes, or a texture that reads as slimy, sticky, or shelled consistently trigger it. Insects, spiders, and reptiles share almost none of the baby markers, and on top of that, many of them historically carried disease, poison, or parasites. So your brain isn't just failing to find them cute, it's actively flagging them as a threat to stay away from running an entirely separate piece of ancient software that evolved for a completely different job. Which raises an obvious question. If cuteness is really just a hijacked parental instinct, does it actually change how animals get treated in the real world? The answer is uncomfortable, and the data backs it up. Conservation funding follows cuteness far more than it follows actual ecological importance. Pandas, koalas and tigers receive a wildly disproportionate share of global conservation donations compared to reptiles, amphibians, and insects, even when those less charismatic species play a far bigger role in holding an ecosystem together. Researchers even have a name for the ones that lose out, the underdogs of conservation. A slug, a beetle, a bat, all critical to their environments, all chronically underfunded, all essentially invisible to public sympathy because they don't check the boxes evolution wired us to respond to. Zoos know this too, whether they say it out loud or not. Panda exhibits and otter enclosures draw enormous crowds and enormous donations, often subsidizing entire institutions on the strength of a single charismatic species. Meanwhile, a room full of rare beetles or an endangered toad species sits nearly empty most days, even when that toad is closer to extinction than the panda standing 100 feet away in a far more expensive habitat. Bats are maybe the clearest case study of all. Structurally, a bat's face is almost the exact opposite of the baby schema. Small eyes, elongated snout, leathery wings instead of soft limbs. Culturally, they've spent centuries being cast as omens, disease carriers, creatures of the night, showing up in folklore across continents as something to fear rather than something to protect. And yet bats are responsible for pollinating hundreds of plant species and consuming enormous quantities of crop-damaging insects every single year, providing a level of agricultural value that dwarfs almost anything a panda contributes to its own ecosystem. Their ecological value has almost nothing to do with how humans feel looking at them, and that mismatch has cost them dearly. Bat population collapses barely register in public consciousness the way a single-stranded panda cub does on the evening news. So is any of this actually about safety? A little, but far less than people assume. A koala isn't harmless because it's cute. Koalas carry chlamydia at rates high enough to threaten their own populations, and they're perfectly capable of scratching a human badly enough to require stitches. A baby hippo is, by almost every objective measure, adorable, round-faced, big-eyed, clumsy, and also one of the most dangerous animals on the entire African continent once it reaches adulthood, responsible for more human deaths every year than lions. Cuteness was never a scorecard for danger. It's a scorecard for shape, and shape and danger were never actually correlated to begin with. Even venomous animals show this split. A blue-ringed octopus is small, round, oddly charming to look at, and one of the most lethal creatures in the ocean. A harmless garden snake, meanwhile, gets a full body recoil from most people despite posing zero threat at all. Shape decided the reaction long before anyone stopped to check the actual danger. There's a psychological layer sitting underneath all of this too, and it explains why cuteness doesn't just make us feel warm, it makes us want to interact, sometimes in ways that don't even make logical sense. Psychologists call it cute aggression, that odd urge some people feel to squeeze, pinch, or bite something adorable, not out of any real desire to hurt it, but because the emotional response is so overwhelming that the brain seems to need some outlet to release the pressure. It's one of the strangest side effects of the exact same wiring that makes a puppy irresistible in the first place. The system evolved to protect fragile things, and every so often, it misfires into a reaction that looks nothing like protection at all. Marketing figured this out decades before science had a name for any of it. Mascots, plush toys, animated characters, almost all of them are quietly engineered with exaggerated baby schema proportions. Oversized heads, huge eyes, short stubby limbs, soft rounded edges everywhere you look. It isn't a stylistic accident or a random design trend, it's a direct exploitation of the same trigger a baby panda activates, deliberately built into a character with no biological need to look that way at all, purely because it works on the same ancient wiring every single time, in every culture, on every continent. Even the way animals are photographed for social media plays into this. A dog photographed at eye level with wide, forward-facing framing performs differently online than the exact same dog photographed from above at a distance. Camera angle alone can nudge a viewer's brain closer to from that baby schema trigger, which is part of why certain pet accounts and certain animal species dominate social platforms almost entirely on the strength of geometry rather than personality or intelligence. This even shapes which species end up in our homes in the first place. Dogs and cats were shaped by generations of selective breeding toward flatter faces, bigger eyes, and rounder heads, often without anyone consciously deciding that was the goal. Breeds and individual animals that happened to drift closer to the baby schema got chosen, bred again, and passed that shape forward, while the animals that didn't simply got passed over, one litter at a time, for thousands of years. Which brings up the uncomfortable core of this whole question. Cuteness was never really about the animal. It's a reflex your brain runs, built millions of years ago, to keep human infants alive. And it doesn't check whether the thing in front of it is actually a baby, actually helpless, or actually harmless. It just checks the shape over and over on every creature you'll ever encounter without asking permission first. A panda didn't earn extra protection because it's more ecologically important than a bat. A spider didn't earn your instinctive recoil because it's more dangerous than a hippo. Somewhere far back in evolutionary history, your brain built a simple checklist for worth protecting, and every animal on the planet is still being silently measured against that same checklist, whether or not the outcome makes any ecological sense at all. The next time something makes your chest tighten with affection, or your skin crawl with revulsion, it's worth asking what's actually happening underneath that reaction. You're not really responding to the animal standing in front of you. You're responding to a shape your brain learned to love or fear long before that particular animal ever existed at all.